Hello my dear viewers, this week I want to take you to Manhattan, more specifically Inwood Hill Park, on the northern tip of the island. But before we get there, I parked my car a few streets away to walk through the neighborhood, as it was really a while since I was here, and oh did I forget just how hilly this place really is. I basically tired myself out before I even reached my destination. But you know what? It was worth it, as I saw many things along the way that I can share with you. For instance, this marvelous situation here. Now, I do not know about you, but I would certainly have a hard time falling asleep in one of those bedrooms up there, knowing that my life depended on few metal beams below. I wonder why they built them like this. I honestly don't know the history here. But this area has the highest elevations in Manhattan, with lots of rocks and cliffs. In fact, the highest point in Manhattan is nearby, as well as the deepest subway station. Therefore, you see the buildings on the side built on stone, but not these ones. And again, I just don't know, maybe they wanted to remove the rock to use it for other projects, or maybe it was a cheaper option than cutting the stone, who knows? But it certainly looks scary and cool at the same time. Walking ahead, I reached Broadway, the only street that runs through the whole length of Manhattan. And in fact, not just Manhattan, but then it travels on the Broadway Bridge and goes all the way up to almost Albany, the capital of New York. Certainly an interesting history behind just one street, which maybe I'll try to explore in some future video. But on Broadway and 204th Street, there is Dyckman Farmhouse. Built in the 1780s, I think I saw in one of the books I have that the porch was added later on. Again, I hope my memory is correct, but yeah, in general, the house itself is pretty close to being 250 years old. And that is what I love about the city, that you can walk in a modern place surrounded by skyscrapers sometimes, and then come across something historical, something that will take you back in time, just casually, in the middle of the city, like this. Here you see the back of the house. And it actually also gave me a great idea for a cool video in the future about Manhattan, which I think is pretty unique even for YouTube standards. But I will put it together at the end of the summer, if I will be able to keep my excitement inside and not do it earlier. And so we get to Inwood Hill Park. And it's kind of an interesting place because on some trails you do have many people running or even walking their dogs, but on others, especially a little bit deeper in the park, it's kind of lonely, you know? Certainly you would never guess you are in Manhattan, of all places. It really feels like some place outside of the city. And certainly, I would not want to be in the park after dark, as I am guessing there are no lights in most areas. Every single light post is broken. Every single one. I mean, what is up with that? But even if you are a tough person and not afraid of the dark or a situation like this, and still decide to go jogging with a flashlight or something like that, I still wouldn't really recommend it, because you have to be careful. On some trails you have serious damage of the surface, like here for example, so I can just see accidentally twisting your ankle or something of that nature. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. I have never been here in this park after it gets dark, so I only can imagine the situations. of how it looks like. But you know what? I'm also sure that it's a great spot to look at the night sky and the stars. Due to the lack of light, the night sky is more visible here than in any other part of Manhattan. We first come across the Whaleback Rock, which is an outcrop, essentially exposed bedrock. Now, what I will say next is hard to imagine. I know, I tried doing it many times, but about 20,000 years ago or so, during the Ice Age, New York City was covered by a glacier, essentially a slow-moving ice and snow that was about 1.5 miles high. To give you a better perspective of that, if you put like 5, maybe even 6 Empire State Buildings on top of one another, that is roughly the distance. That is how high the glacier, which was covering New York City, was. As it began to melt and retreat, it left behind these grooves and marks on rocks, which you see here. So you can tell which direction the glacier moved, and there are few places that you can see this in New York City, like even the rocks in Central Park. A little further down, check out this spot, Glacial potholes. It's pretty cool, right? It looks like this was man-made using some form of equipment, but these are actually done naturally. Okay, and here is a really awesome place, Indian Caves. They were created by rocks tumbling during the glacial retreat, and we have clear evidence that Native Americans used them before the Europeans came to Americas. In fact, various artifacts were found in these caves, like arrowheads and tools. I went in a little bit. They are not that big, but I did not want to test my luck and go all the way inside or turn on my light or something like that, because I heard that there could be homeless people there, which use them sometimes. Or who knows, I don't want to get the local bats upset by shining light into their faces as they're trying to take a nap. Certainly I would not be a happy person about that. As I'm trying to take a nap, drooling on my pillow, next thing I know, a kid runs up to me, takes a picture, and then posts it on YouTube? That wouldn't be fun. And I even found a tree growing out of a rock. Check this out. Nah, just kidding. But it does look pretty cool from a certain angle. It actually does seem like it's coming out of the rock. Then our next stop is this rock, the Shorakkopoch Rock. Before New York was New York, it was called New Amsterdam and settled by the Dutch West India Company. Shortly afterwards, Peter Minuit was appointed the director, and as you see on this rock, he bought Manhattan from the Lenape Indians for about 60 guilders worth of goods like beads, for example, which roughly translates to about $24. And supposedly this happened in this spot under a tulip tree. But there are a few issues with this. Like I tell my students, many times we like to simplify history or see it as good and bad, black or white, but history is complicated. People are complex. And so even with this story, we have no treaty or trace of the document which was signed, if there even was any. At the same time, Native Americans did not see the world in the same way that Peter Minuit did. For Native Americans did not, well, again, I'm not an expert on this history, so I could be wrong here, but in general, Native Americans did not have the concept of owning land and private property. So by selling the land to the Dutch, I am sure they were not thinking in terms of giving the land away forever, but rather for the settlers to use the land for hunting and sustaining life, the way that Native Americans were doing. Plus, they could not really sell Manhattan because few Native American tribes used the island of Manhattan for hunting. So it's not like they could, guarantee the complete transfer or the selling of the island to the Dutch. Therefore, it's an interesting topic which I think this location can expand on somehow by offering more information. There is room to do so, and it's a great location for people to look at and learn about the history here. But now let's get off the main trails and take some paths less traveled. We have some walls and stairs which are slowly being reclaimed by nature. Here, I had to even jump over some obstacles. It's a little bit like real hiking. It was fun. In fact, about 100 years ago or so, wealthy families had homes here, summer homes. Like, for example, as you see here, this was the location of the Straus mansion. Isidor Straus was the co-owner of Macy's department store. Unfortunately, he, along with his wife, died on the Titanic in 1912. But there were a number of homes here, like you see in this photograph, the House of Mercy, which was for women who were involved in prostitution or had children and not married, which was not acceptable at that time. But these homes have been destroyed by fire or were demolished in like the 1930s or so. And you see, other than the marker itself, nothing really remains. Well, maybe there's some foundations or traces. Like you just saw, we were walking on those trails. But in the summer, it's just impossible to go deeper into these woods and explore. Maybe in the winter, I can come back again and see if there are some more traces of the past. Because after all, there is some really interesting things here in this area, which I did not include in this video, so maybe I will do something more about this in the future. But nearby is another marker of Fort Cockhill, which was a military fortification built by the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Well, it was really an outpost. The main fort was Fort Washington, then Fort Tryon, and finally this outpost of Fort Cockhill. During the Revolution, these forts were captured by the British, giving a big loss for the Continental Army, as close to 3,000 Americans were taken prisoners. And here we reach the tip of Manhattan. Above me is the Henry Hudson Bridge. And on the other side, we have another borough, Bronx. On my return walk, I found something incredible. A light post that was not broken. And for a second, I had hope inside that maybe in this section they existed. But nope. I think that was the only one I saw that was completely intact. The last thing I did was cross the railroad tracks and then walk along the Hudson River, enjoying the views along the way. On the other side, we have New Jersey. And here we come to the tip of the island. This is amazing. On the other side of Manhattan we have Battery Park and views of the Statue of Liberty, the Freedom Tower, all the skyscrapers. And then here, on the opposite side of the island, these are our views. It's a big difference. I hope you enjoyed this walk with me, and like always, stay safe out there, and I will see you next week in another New York location. Bye bye!